The remorseless Russian advance. To escalate or negotiate is now the question. Vladimir Putin ordering a change to the status of deterrence forces, which includes nuclear weapons, because of what he called Western and NATO aggression.
That's why I order the Defence Minister and Chief of General Staff to move Russia's deterrence forces to high combat alert.
And yet, just possibly, peace talks. The day began with Ukraine rejecting an offer to talk in Belarus. But as war rages night and day across the country, the chance of talks now at the Belarus-Ukrainian border. Ukraine's President Zelensky said this morning, we want peace and will talk anywhere else except a country which is attacking us. Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv, overnight, the rolling thunder of multiple missile strikes. Vladimir Putin wants to destroy Ukraine's identity. In reality, he's promoting it. Russian troops on foot in Kharkiv using armoured vehicles for cover. And here's why. Ukrainian Ground Forces, they pretty much only have ground forces, engaging Russians with rocket-propelled grenades and a machine gun. Russian tanks carve up the lawns around the city's tower blocks.
These are the Russian troops with a Z on their vehicles. They're stopping in our courtyard. My God.
In Kharkiv, Ukrainian forces inspect a convoy they've destroyed. This came from the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. And a caution here, Russian soldiers are banned from filming, and Ukrainians are not showing images of their soldiers being killed, wounded. And they are, of course, vastly outgunned, outnumbered. 4 days, and this is what President Putin has to show for it. Of course, all these red areas gained by Russia will now move inward, deeper into Ukrainian territory, whilst attempting to join up. But it's here in Kharkiv, the eastern city in Ukraine, which has seen the heaviest fighting in the past 24 hours.
I'm Vladimir Klitschko, and I'm addressing the entire world to stop this war that Russia has started. You need to act now to stop Russian aggression with anything you can have now. In an hour, or by tomorrow is going to be too late.
Tower blocks and houses are being hit. This was a blood donor center damaged by an attack. At least 4 civilians were killed in this strike in the northeast of the country. President Zelensky has likened it to genocide.
We have to call things by their names. The criminal acts of Russia against Ukraine bear signs of genocide. I talked about this with General Secretary of the UN. Russia is on a path towards evil. The world has to start depriving Russia of its right to vote in the UN Security Council.
And so, in the second city, Kharkiv, in Europe, in the 21st century, we have a children's hospital, filmed in recent days, moved to a bomb shelter. There's a mattress over there. Go to bed, she says. Shan't, says the child. Facilities in here range from the non-existent to primitive. Over the border in St. Petersburg, yesterday across Russia, it was around 3,000 people arrested for protesting against a war they say is Putin's, not theirs. Today, 900 more dragged and beaten into custody across 44 Russian cities. The latest figure, 4,124 detained. No to war, they chant. It will grow and grow unless the talks on which so very much depends can somehow deliver us.
Alex Thompson with that report. Well, we are reporting tonight from Ukraine's western capital, Lviv, or Lvov, or Lemberg, depending on which century you're in. This city epitomizes the fluid borders of a Middle Europe torn apart by the wars of the past. If Kyiv falls and if Ukraine is partitioned, this could become the capital of a free Ukraine, the West Berlin of the 21st century, if you like. Today, it is full of those fleeing the war and hoping to cross the border into nearby Poland.
There are many new human front lines in this war, and we went to see one of them, the Grand train station in Lviv, transit hub for desperate humanity, fleeing the fighting everywhere else in this country, in one direction, west. Everyone has a supercomputer in their hand, but it can't spirit you away from here. So your husband will stay here?
Yeah, he will stay here and
Why?
go to
fight?
the fight, yeah.
He will stay here to fight?
Yeah, yeah.
And you will go with your daughter?
Yeah, to the Poland.
But what have you left behind? What was your existence before?
Like all of my life. I left behind all of my plan to my life. So I will build my life again, like from zero.
One step at a time. Next, platform 3. Waiting for the 11:45 to Poland. One-way tickets only. The journey from citizen to refugee. From sanity to insanity. And all this is on you, Vladimir Putin. If these images were in black and white, you'd say this is a typical refugee scene from the Second World War. But it's in color, and it's happening here in the year 2022, in the heart of Europe.
And when all the time my colleagues were worried, international colleagues, about me and asking, maybe you should not go to Ukraine, something can happen, I was, no guys, this is not possible. We are in 21st century in the middle of Europe, nothing like this can happen.
And now it has.
And it has, and I'm now not that positive anymore. Same was my approach in the first 2 days, like, okay, I wait, this will be stopped by European Union shortly. This cannot last long. Few days later, I think maybe I'm too positive again, and maybe I should go.
And here's why. Crossfire on the streets of the capital. No one wants to be caught up in this. Or the oil depot on the outskirts of Kyiv, now a ball of fire spewing toxic fumes. Depriving the Ukrainians of fuel is essential if Moscow wants to conquer a city showing remarkable resilience. Before we left Kyiv, we bumped into Sviatoslav Yurash, Ukraine's youngest member of parliament, with the latest must-have accessory.
They were essentially giving us the guns, option to have the guns if we want to protect ourselves.
And what kind of gun is it?
That's AKM-74.
Have you used it before?
I had some run-ins, but I'm not exactly experienced. But this is a skill you learn fast when you need to protect your life.
Is there a danger with so many civilians, untrained civilians like you having guns?
There's so many dangers, so many Russians having guns and trying to kill those civilians.
This war is a steep learning curve for everyone. First, Poland. They've welcomed all refugees from Ukraine with open arms. But in this instance, it appears that isn't the case if you're black. These were African students stuck at the border, forbidden by the Polish police and army to cross over. But also a learning curve for Germany. Here, a standing ovation for the Ukrainian ambassador in Berlin. The masks, a reminder that calamities travel in packs these days.
We want peace, no war.
After weeks of criticism from its allies and domestic pressure in the form of huge anti-Putin demonstrations, Germany isn't just sending arms to Ukraine, it is also increasing its spending to have the biggest military budget in Europe. The country has finally found a way of stepping over the long shadow of its history. Germany rearms, Europe relieved. There's another headline you didn't see coming.
And Poland has denied that any black refugees have been barred from entering the country at its border with Ukraine. As we were reporting, social media footage has emerged appearing to show groups of black refugees, many of them students, gathered close to where we are now, with some claiming that they have been refused entry for days because of the color of their skin. The office of Poland's Prime Minister this afternoon tweeted, "There is no discrimination." Meanwhile, Nigeria's Foreign Minister has tweeted that he raised the issue with his Ukrainian counterpart and was told that Ukraine's border forces had been directed to allow all foreigners to leave. Well, joining me now live is the Europe Minister, James Cleverly. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. Can we get an assurance from you that any refugee leaving Ukraine who wants to get to Britain can go to Britain?
Well, what we have already said is that, of course, the UK will be taking refugees from Ukraine. The Prime Minister said that yesterday. And also what the Ukrainian ambassador said, I think, in an interview this morning, is that the most immediate need, of course, is for places like Poland and other countries bordering Ukraine to get support from the international community to look after the refugees which are crossing into their borders. We've already announced a £100 million humanitarian support package. We, of course, will look at what more we can do to support both refugees and the countries that are currently hosting them.
Right, but I mean, Poland could fill up quite quickly if they come across in the numbers predicted. If they then want to go to Britain, would you facilitate that without any questions asked?
So, look, I to repeat the answer I've just given. The Prime Minister has said, of course, the UK will host refugees. Of course we will. We're an incredibly generous nation. But the immediate challenge is the thousands of refugees in those countries bordering Ukraine. That's the challenge that we see in the here and now. That's the challenge that we need to support. And that's why we've already committed £100 million of humanitarian support. And of course, we will look at what more we need to do to support those refugees and the countries that are hosting them.
Right. But this is really about waiving the visa requirements, which other European countries have done. Will you do the same? Will you stop any visa requirements for Ukrainians?
Well, I mean, each country has a different set of circumstances. The countries that have waived visa requirements are the ones who are really at the front line and are receiving those first waves of refugees. And of course, in that circumstance, where you're right on the Ukrainian border, the right thing to do is help people get out of Ukraine that need to get out of Ukraine. And we have committed to helping those refugees and helping those countries at that point. What we will need to do in terms of our own refugee support package will be largely determined by what happens next. We hope, of course, that this will be a short-lived conflict, but it could be a protracted conflict. And the refugee requirement will vary depending on which of those circumstances comes about.
Okay, let's move on to something else, which is Vladimir Putin's nuclear threats today, more or less. I mean, putting his nuclear forces, on a new defensive footing. This is a really alarming stuff. Do you think that there is a greater danger to the world of him losing in Ukraine and getting desperate, or him winning?
Well, talking about nuclear weapons is, I think, an admission from the Kremlin that the lightning war that they were expecting to win easily in Ukraine hasn't happened. Of course, what we want is, as always, we want de-escalation. We really want this conflict to come to an end, for the Ukrainians to be able to live in peace and security. We will continue to push that both more generally, internationally, and indeed in this particular issue. But ultimately, as I say, this, I think, is an admission by the Kremlin, and it should be seen as such by the Russian people, that this conflict has not gone to plan. But
is the world in more danger if he loses in Ukraine, if things don't go according to plan, than if it did?
Well, we are not going to, diplomatically speaking, abandon the people of Ukraine. This invasion was unprovoked. It was unnecessary. There was no justification to it. What Russia needs to do now is withdraw its troops from Ukraine, withdraw those troops from away from the Ukrainian border, and we can't be bullied into sacrificing the people of Ukraine. The simple fact of the matter is the Ukrainians have demonstrated a tenacity in defense of their homeland. The Russian people, the Russian senior military leadership should recognize that and recognize there is no victory of any kind for Vladimir Putin, for the Kremlin here in Ukraine, and that they should withdraw immediately.
And what do you make of these peace talks that are going to take place tomorrow morning on the Belarus-Ukrainian border without preconditions, we're told? Do you set any store by them? Are there any hopes that they might succeed?
Well, obviously, what we ultimately want to see is the swift ending of this conflict. But Russia, Vladimir Putin, has demonstrated a willingness to lie at every stage through the prelude of this conflict and during the invasion itself. So we will judge Russia only on what it does, not on what it says. But as I say, ultimately what we want is for the people of Ukraine to be left in peace, for the Russian troops to withdraw, and for this threat, for this aggression from the Kremlin to be removed, and removed permanently from Ukraine.
James Cleverly, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, they are making Molotov cocktails in their front gardens. They are pushing back tanks with their bare hands. They are ordinary people suddenly turned into urban warriors. This is an extraordinary example of popular resilience here, not just in Kyiv, but just about everywhere else in the country. Let's go to Lindsay Hilsum in Dnipro. Lindsay.
Matt, there's definitely a change of atmosphere here today, I would say, much more jittery. Still no air raids, but air raid sirens, including in our hotel. They've been off twice today. You know, everybody get down to the bunker, even though there's really nothing going on. Down in the bunker today, I met a young woman called Katerina, who traveled from Mariupol, where there has been a lot of fighting, with her son and the family guinea pig. I met somebody else who had a rabbit in a cage. Anyway, Katerina was saying, you know, do you think it's safe to stay here, or should we try and get to Romania? What should we do? And then you have the rumours. Somebody's friend's auntie saw a Russian tank up the road. Well, we're not quite sure where it was. Probably a lot of this isn't true. But what you do get the sense of, as we found out today when we went to one of the main squares, that people in the city of Dnipro are now preparing for war. The music of war, bottles that once held beer or soft drinks being prepared as Molotov cocktails to throw at Russian tanks. People here call them Putin's smoothies. And will you throw the Molotov cocktail yourself?
Yeah, I personally, yes. But my mother very against this, but
Your mother isn't very happy about that?
Of course.
So why will you do it if your mother says no?
Because...
It's emotional, especially for young people who just last week were thinking of maybe getting married or studying in Europe, having a normal life. Like 24-year-old Maria, hoping to succeed as an artist.
It's my country, it's my city, it's my people, and it hurts when another country try to throw it away from us. And I don't want to run, I don't scared, I feel only angry.
She might be at a jumble sale trying on a shirt for size, but it'll be torn up to use as a rag in a Molotov bottle, along with smashed up polystyrene, some of which came from the walls of the music studio that Maxime recently built. Could you ever have imagined being in this situation?
No, but look, I must say that our generation, we were like smiling after we heard some war stories about the grandfathers that fight Nazism. Like it was like tales or something, and smiled. But now we are there. We are like our grandfathers.
So. Is your generation up to it?
Yes, yes. And I must say the next thing. If Putin had thought that he can conquer us, he mistaken big time.
President Putin's pretense that he's defending Ukraine's Russian speakers has been turned on its head.
Nobody in Ukrainian won't speak Russian anymore, because this language is language of our enemy.
The people of Dnipro are collecting medical supplies and anything else that might be useful for the troops and volunteer defence forces. Water as well. The prospect of war has united this city, but the reality may yet spawn cruelty and division. Now that's what in Britain we like to call the Blitz spirit. But you know there's a dark side to this as well. A lot of people have got weapons here, and weapons are being just handed out willy-nilly. And, you know, all those young people I met today, I thought that they were extraordinary. But there are thugs here, just as there are thugs everywhere in the world. And some of them are now roaming around in groups with weapons. And there is a great danger that they are going to start to rob people who are fleeing from their homes. And there are already reports of that happening. And also groups taking the law into their own hands and saying, oh, you're a saboteur, beating people up. That is the kind of division that you see in a situation like this as it becomes increasingly anarchic. Everybody hates the Russians, but the danger is Ukrainians turning on each other. We just heard that young woman who came from Crimea. She's a Russian speaker saying now Russian is the language of the enemy. What about if you speak Russian in the street? What are some of those thugs going to do? So there is a huge danger here, not just from Russia, but from the divisions and the cruelty that war creates.
Lindsay Hilsum, thank you so much. Well, we're joined now by the Ukrainian MP Yaroslav Zelenyak, who's been supporting troops out on the streets of Kyiv. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. And I noticed that you, like so many of your colleagues, have a gun next to you. Have you been using it at all?
No, thanks to God, I have not used it during the war. But unfortunately, I just come back from the basement because we have the bombing alarm and there was some jets on the sky. As we after that get know, it was Ukrainian jets, but also we have this alarm. Look, I want to just follow your colleague speech. I'm from Mariupol. It is one of the most eastern city in Ukraine. I'm a Russian speaker. My family speaks Russian. Every time when I'm not official in the parliament, I speak Russian. And yesterday, I have visited a lot of checkpoints with our soldiers, and I speak with them in Russian. Nobody in Ukraine, if you will be in the west or western part of Ukraine, in the central part of Ukraine, or eastern part of Ukraine, never, and even now, will say you something wrong or something bad if you speak Russian. There is no language problem in Ukraine. There is zero problem with Russia. I could say it because I'm always speaks just Russian. At least I'm in the parliament making my speech or on the Ukrainian TV. So I'm not agree with your colleague. There is no risk. Every day, every time, you could speak in Ukraine what language you like. If you speak Ukrainian, speak Ukrainian, and everyone understands you. If you speak Russian, you speak Russian.
Let me just briefly ask you about this particular issue. Do you think one of the reasons why perhaps Russian soldiers are not fighting as hard as they could be is because ultimately they regard Ukrainians as their brethren?
I think they are not fighting for something. Look, so we have seen these guys from Russia and from Belarus. They are very young. They have born in 2002, 2003. And they leave their even mobile phone in Russia, and they think that they go not to war, they go to some teaching of war on our country, and that's why. And at the same time, Ukrainian soldiers, they are protecting their land. We have not any other country.
All right, let me ask you about these peace talks tomorrow morning on the Belarus border. How many hopes do you hold out for these talks, if they are indeed peace talks?
Look, I'm opposition MP, and usually in usual time, I am opposing our president, our government, and criticize them very well. But now I'm believing in our president, and he said that we have not much hope for this. We have seen at least last 8 years that Putin wants to destroy our country. And now he's failing. And I think that today's...
So you're in a stronger position now with these talks than you might have been in the past?
Yeah, I'm sure. Because the plan of Putin and his guys was to occupy our capital city, Kyiv, and some part of Ukraine, at least in 1-2 days. But now we are fighting third day, and we are winning. There is, now when I just speak with our former Speaker of the Parliament, he's now in the center of Kyiv. He said, "Oh, group of tanks is going to us," and our first thought is that okay, we will destroy this.